I created a challenge to try to use up my stash this year, and I've included that in the prompts that we have for you. So it might be a little bit confusing, but basically what I did and what I encourage you to do is to just make a list of supplies and tools and pigmented mediums that you want to use. You can have a separate list for each, or you can even just make a list of your shelves, maybe 1, 2, 3. I could have each of these shelves numbered, and then I just make sure that I pick something off that shelf to use for a project. So when you see RNG listed and a number next to some of my prompts, that just means that that was a random number generated number from my list, and you can use that number to count through your list. And if you get to the bottom of your list, you just continue at the top until you get to the number if you have less items. But then you can use whatever it is that you have on your list. The thing about this workshop is that this is not here's a project I'm going to do and you're going to try to mimic this project. This is more of intuitive journaling. We're going to have some prompts. It's sort of a guided journaling experience, but at the same time, once I give you some guidance, I consider myself kind of like the compass, where I send you in a direction, but your path is unique to you. Each of you will have your own path and your own intuition that you're guided by as you go along this journey. And all I'm trying to do is give you enough information to get your creative juices flowing, to get you going. And you can certainly follow along. I will be demonstrating live and you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So if you want to just follow along and use exactly the similar materials to what I'm using and you have them, you can absolutely do that. This is, make it yours, make it how it works for you. You can use whichever prompts make sense to you. If you say, you know what, I don't like that color today. Really, the color for my day is, it's not black, it's yellow. I want yellow for happiness. Okay, then you get to choose yellow. That's your creative license. And I invite you and encourage you to follow that guidance. You can look at these as challenges if you want. So a challenge is something that says you need to use this, and then you're pushed to figure out a way to make it work. Or it can just be a guide in which it just says, here's an idea. Does that work for you? And you accept it or not. So you can use it or lose it as well. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, I have different materials. I created 2 lists. I created one that's my colored pigmented mediums. I have a list of all of my supplies and materials or techniques that I want to use. It's guided enough to get you started, but loose enough to let you follow your heart. The other thing I'm going to be starting to do, and I'm behind on because of all the technology challenges, is I want to start doing a Let's Talk series where I do these short, condensed versions of introducing you to various things, whether it's supplies and materials or techniques. I know that my past workshops, especially in the beginning, I would just throw the whole workshop in there unedited, and it's very long and it's hard. It's a lot of material, but it's spread out throughout a 1.5 hour video, and that can be really daunting for people, and I get that. So I'm trying to take that information, condense it into a smaller amount, and just do these little short videos, and those are coming down the road here. This year, I'll be starting to do those as soon as I can get to them. And hopefully that will help. I thought about re-editing some of those older videos, and I may get to that too. But there's one of me, and I'm a one-man band here. So I don't have a husband or partner that's my tech support side of things. So it's all a learning curve. So I appreciate all your patience while I've learned these processes. Now, let's get to the topic at hand. The topic, or the theme of the month, is mindfulness. And within mindfulness, I put in happiness for today's theme. And what do I mean by happiness? Because people use happiness different ways, and I want to make sure that we're on the same page. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what I mean for happiness, and then we'll do a little writing exercise related to that. So I don't know if you've heard the quote, happiness is an inside job, but I truly believe that. And when I say happiness, I mean the general capital H happiness, meaning that your general state of being. Like I can say I'm happy in my life, even though I might be sad in the moment. So if you're talking about a feeling in the moment, like right now I'm having a feeling, some people will say I am happy right now. But if we're talking the general sense happiness, that is contentment in our lives, or acceptance of our situation. Oftentimes we can perceive a situation differently from another person. So we're both experiencing the same thing, but I can be content and still happy, even with the situation that maybe would be deemed unhappy for another person, just by how I perceive that situation. And really, humans assign value to situations, right? So here's an example, and I've used this before. I've missed a flight. I was planning a trip and I broke my arm and I couldn't go on this trip. So I was very sad. And if I put a poll out there to you guys, you would all say that is not a good thing, right? You would assign the value of that's a negative thing. But then later on, I find out that the plane that I was supposed to be on crashed, and I actually survived that because I didn't go on that plane. So later on now, we're assigning the broken arm as a positive. So by itself, whatever incident it is, doesn't have an intrinsic value. We create the value of it based on our perspective. And when we can look at the world in a way that maintains a happiness perspective or a positive perspective, or at least an acceptance perspective, we can be more at peace and have more happiness in our lives, because we're not spending all the time lamenting about why things aren't the way we want them. We're moving forward on to the next thing and accepting that situation as it is. Now, that doesn't mean to say that if there's something in your life that you have the power to change, that you should just go, oh, it is what it is. I'm going to accept it and move on and not do anything about it. There is some discernment that needs to happen, right? Of what you have control over and what you don't. If it's something that happened in the past, you have no control over that. It's gone. You only have control over this moment and you. You don't have control over what somebody else does, what they say, how they behave. Nobody makes you feel anything. You make you feel anything because of how you interact with that thought in that situation. So what if we had the power to change our perspective on something and be able to find a contentment in our lives? I believe that is very possible, and I've worked really hard to do that. And even though I can't say that every day I'm happy and that I struggle with things, especially technology, I'm not going to skip. I'm not going to give up. I'm not ready to give up and say, you know what, I can't do this. There are days where I feel like, oh, this isn't meant for me. I should just give up on this dream of mine to get this channel going and to do these workshops because technology is fighting me every step of the way. But I choose not to, because the things that I get by being here with you bring joy to me, and hopefully I'm bringing joy to you, and it's worth the fight. It's worth me fighting for it and not believing those self-limiting beliefs of I can't. So there's a balance, right, of what you can control, what you can't, and how you accept what it is that you can't control and move on. So one of the analogies I like to use when it comes to how we kind of create our own suffering is our thoughts. you've heard the quote, probably, we are what we think. But the reality is we only are what we think if we believe that we are what we think, and we don't believe that we have the capacity to change how we think. There are lots of thoughts coming at us that we don't really have a lot of control over. And I think of our minds as a little radio receiver, and that's where music comes in. I didn't choose that theme, but that really worked. It was one of those automatically generated. And I said, that really does work for this topic, because I think of our minds kind of as a two-way radio. We can generate thoughts, right? But we also thoughts happen. When we try to meditate and try not to think of anything, I mean, if you do this and you stay silent for a minute, just trying to focus on your breath, you'll be amazed at how many other thoughts, I call them pirate radio, come into your head. However, we have the power to tune into and to respond to react to behave on those thoughts. That's what we can control. They come, they're programs. We can reprogram through some of the exercises that I'll talk about today. We can try reprogramming those thoughts. And I believe that that's possible too, and reduce and silence them. But just change the station. Are we on future radio? Are we on past radio? Are we on NOW now radio? Which station are you choosing to listen to subscribe to today? And how can you maybe shift your radio station that you're listening to? Well, the writing exercise that we're going to do today, and I do a little short writing exercise each time that goes along with our journal, and I write mine directly in my journal, and then I do all of my journaling and collage and mixed media over it, and some of it shows, some of it doesn't. But you can write it in a separate journal. You can write it on a separate piece of paper that you cut up and use as collage material, or you can not do it at all. Really do it how it makes sense to you. But the question that I want to pose is, what is the playlist that's going on in your mental radio? Are there some common stations, that you tend to go to? And maybe you want to think about those stations that interfere with your happiness. Maybe there are stations like, your past radio station that's blocking your ability to be happy. Or maybe you want to write about stations that are supporting your happiness. I think it would be fun to maybe even write down titles of songs, make up your own titles of songs that kind of match those thought patterns that tend to recur. So I'm going to just set a timer. If I can find my timer. I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes. Just write whatever comes to mind. If it's nothing about happiness and something else comes to mind, you can write about that too. We can do whatever we want. Creative license, people. I got a kind of a kick out of what popped into my head. And some were things that were not some of my blocks, and some of them were things that I want to be my themes. So, oops, I did it again was one, because and there's always mistakes to be made. Unstoppable is one of my favorite Sia songs. Let It Be, that's on acceptance and moving forward. And then I was thinking of that song that says, Mama said knock you out. And I was thinking, technology knocks you out. And then the other one was, I get knocked down, but I get up again. So that was lyrics to songs. If I couldn't think of the title, lyrics to songs came. And then I Will Survive. So those are some of the things that came to mind that were either, some of them were blocks and some of them were, my themes to kind of counter those blocks, right? So hopefully some good ideas came to mind to you. And as a homework, if you want to go deeper with this topic, I encourage you and invite you to do that as well. But we're going to move on to the intuitive journaling now. All right. So what I've done is I've collected my prompts, my prompt items. I just have these little project boxes that I collect materials for, and ideas came to mind as I was collecting things, but I try not to spend too much time with it because I really want it to happen together while we're working together. But I found a, let me go through the prompts. The theme is happiness, which we talked about, and the focal subject is music. So this had a guitar, so I grabbed it. It's a stamp, a rubber stamp. The pattern is music notes. So I have some music notes. I have a musical instrument, although I don't play the guitar, I play the piano, but I also have a radio here. And as I start collecting some of these items, ideas come to my mind, like I went to find a paper bag, that was one of the lists, and I thought this looks like piano keys, so that kind of worked for the music. The next thing I did talk about the music notes. The color is black, so I had to use a fountain pen ink, and I decided to go ahead and use black fountain pen ink. But I already used black in my writing, so even if that was all I used, it was black and everything else was colorful, that's okay. It just means use some black, okay? And that's pretty easy to use. And I use it in just about all of my projects, so that was an easy one. Let's see, and then the tool, which is kind of an interesting one, let's see how this goes, is dot tools. Now these are the tools that I use for my dot painting with acrylics, and I can use acrylic paints as well, but I'm going to see if I can use it with this ink and kind of use it like a dip pen and see if that works. So I'm going to try that out. That's experimenting, and that'll be fun. And the collage material was paper bag, so I found this paper bag that I'll use. And like I said, it kind of follows the black theme, and it also looks a little like a piano. And inside there, it had some of this tissue paper. So I think I'm going to go with this tissue paper. And so that's what I have that I want to try to challenge myself to use. Now, for me, I am using it as a challenge. However, if I start going down the path of my journal and I decide that something doesn't work, at any point I can say, oh, never mind, I'm not going to use that. And I'm okay with that. Okay. So what I typically like to do for my first layer is writing or mark making to activate the page. This just takes away the stress of a big blank page staring you in the face. So that's why I like to do these writing exercises kind of as a first step. If you don't want to write, you can scribble or mark make or do whatever you want, just to break up that blank page so that it's not so intimidating if need be. I could even add, some lines to this. Maybe I'll just do that. So I might even just do something like that. Kind of looks like a Zentangle string. So whatever you need to do to get that page started so it's not so scary. The next thing I like to do is I do enjoy putting some kind of tissue layer, because tissue is a little see-through, so you can see through to whatever patterns I put underneath. This is not that see-through because of the lined paper. So I'm going to do some of this, but I think I'm going to maybe add something else as well, maybe some white tissue paper. So in my tissue stash, I had some altered tissue where I stamped some of those music patterns on it. I also found some journal writing. What I did was and this was an idea that Judy, you gave me from somebody that you followed, but you write your journal this way, then you rotate your paper and you write, and then you write along the other direction. And so even though it's all actual words, it's not as legible, so you could kind of use it as part of your collage material. So I brought that in. So yeah, I like those. Okay, so I'm going to start with this tissue layer. I think the black, the white, and then the stripes. I just had this idea that I want to make a piano. I think I want to make a grand piano. I might do that over the top of this first layer. But I think I want this first layer to be real light. And then I want to do so maybe I'll just use my black and white papers for this layer. Okay, and then I got to bring this bag in too. I wonder, maybe this will be the piano base. So maybe this won't be this bottom layer. This will be the piano base. I want you to see those different textures, but I don't want it to be in the foreground. I want to push it back to the background layer. So one way you can do that is by putting some white gesso. You can use white paint, but white paint tends to be more opaque than the gesso, and so I like to use the gesso because it'll show the textures through it a little bit better. Let that dry while I cut this in the shape of a grand piano. And I think I'll just maybe draw a shape as best I can. I mean, it's a fairly simple shape. And you might be thinking, gosh, black and white doesn't seem like very happy, very happy colors. But I think that speaks to the fact that, you know, life is full of a variety of shades. We have actually a variety of shades of black, right? And even within that, we can still find our happiness. Okay, I'm gonna dry it. I recommend for drying, some people use the heat guns. I prefer a hair dryer, and honestly, if I could buy a new one, and someday when this one dies, I will. But if you can find a hair dryer that has a cool setting on it as well, this one's just high and low, but some of them do actually have a setting you can put cool. This one has the cool shot, but you have to hold it and it reduces the flow. But a cool setting is nice because you're not blowing hot air and you can blow a lot of air. And I prefer to dry it with, you know, less heat is better because acrylic is sensitive to heat. So I think I decided that I wanted this to be kind of here. That way I can maybe write something if I want to have a final message on there. Like I'm thinking happiness is an inside job, or playlist of happiness, or happiness playlist, or something. I might write, or maybe one of my titles. I don't know, but I think I want some space for that. A soft gel. This is actually gloss. Matte medium over the top of it, because I want to do some, maybe that ink over it, and I want it to stick. So this will act as kind of like baby gesso, I think. Now, one thing that
I'm remembering, and I did mention, but the matte medium is a little bit more opaque. Like it does have a little bit of some color to it compared to like the gloss gel medium. So just be aware if you're using that, it may show up a little bit more. So you could use it kind of like a gesso in that way too. I think I'm going to bring in some white acrylic paint. I want to make this kind of stand out against this background, so I want to soften that a little bit more. Gesso isn't as opaque, and this is just a craft white, and it's matte. I still see that texture in the back behind there, but it's not. It's now this is highlighted. And maybe I'll just go ahead and paint black paint. So it's okay if I use the same brush that I already have the gel on. I really want to make this piano more black. I was going to have the stripes, but changed my mind. And that's what I could do. I mean, I could have just painted this, but it took me getting to this step to figure out that I wanted to do that. So, and plus I think I like it kind of raised, you know, I like it. It's a little bit raised off the page. And then I'm going to where the keys are. Too bad I didn't make sure that the white stripe was there. That would have been a little easier, but I'm going to just paint that white because then I'm going to put some of that tissue ink as the keys. Diamine fountain pen ink. Put it in this. I'm going to put it in this little well, and that way I can dip my ball tools into it and see if I can make marks with it. I think that'll be interesting. So let's see how that works. Never tried it. And this is why I like these challenges, is because it makes me do things that maybe aren't my typical thing that I do. So I could even use dropper for that matter. I wonder if I can make little notes with them, you know, like little music notes. I'm going to just dip it right in there. Cool. This is a pretty large tool. They're all getting kind of sloppy because they're bleeding into stuff, but I'm going to go with that. I'm going to let it happen, and then I'm going to play with that feature. See how that goes. This is a style that's unpredictable because you just don't know what's going to happen, and you just go with flow. See how they're kind of bleeding out? Kind of makes me want to. I'm going to use a straw and just blow and see what happens. The art journal I see as a place to experiment and try things risk-free, where I don't have any pressures of having it turn out perfectly. When you get too attached to an outcome, I think that can stifle our creativity and our willingness to play and try new things. And so this is a place where I don't have to worry about that, because I can just try things, see what happens. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. And I'm going to have, if I want to do any kind of writing there, I'm going to have to either write on something and put it down because there's not really a good space there. So I may go over that again and create a little writing space. I'm going to use the ball tool as an embossing stylus, and I'm going to write it on the vellum and see if that works. Let's try that. I'm just using this foam mat. This is just like craft foam. It's a little thicker than the typical craft foam, but you could use regular, or you can use a mouse pad. And if I use vellum, when I emboss over it on this soft base, it turns the vellum white. What I decided to write for my little inspirational is she whispered words of wisdom, let it be, let it be. And also the base of this is textured. It's got the, ooh, it's getting some of that ink coming on there. That's okay. I'm okay with that. Actually, I might want to bring that in a little bit. Because that ink that I use, the fountain ink, is water soluble, so it's not permanent. So it's lifting when I'm adding any kind of moisture, but I think I'm going to use that to my advantage if I can. Hopefully I won't. Hopefully I won't go overboard. I'm going to get this pushed down without touching too much of the surrounding the surrounding ink, because it's when I touch it, it wants to still smear. And I only want to get it around the edges. It's really okay around the edges because I like that idea of it kind of helping seat that. So I'm gonna kind of keep around the edges of the black. Actually, or I'm gonna go back to this, a little bit of this ink and just ink around. Ink, inky-dinky, ink-a-dink-a-doo. Bringing some of that texture of the papers behind. I don't know, that kind of looks cool. It settles down some of that pattern, which I just ended up not really loving. I like some of it, but I just think it's not. It's too busy, I think, for me. All right, so I think I'm going to come in now with white and do a little bit of the same thing where I just finger paint around and mix in. It's gonna, that ink is water soluble, so it's gonna kind of blend with that and create some interesting sort of purple grays, I think. I really would like to create kind of a border. But that ink really does activate, so it's not letting me get much white back in there. It's really turning it. That's okay. I mean, I could go in and really completely go over it, the whole thing, if I wanted to, but I do want, I'm going to try to see if I can get some white around the piano, because I want some contrast between the background and the piano. So all right, I'm gonna try that. How are we doing on time? It's almost 4. Okay. Well, I could keep playing, as you can see, and it just keeps evolving. I mean, it really went in a lot of different directions. I see nothing of the base textures, but that's okay. That's what this is about. This is not about being attached to any one layer. It's about playing and seeing where it takes you. It was supposed to be black and white. It's kind of purple. You know, like I thought it was going to be black and white, but it decided it wasn't going to be black and white. I wanted to make little music notes, and I still might add something like that. Let me just try this layer and we'll see what happens. Okay. Every time I dry it, I have ideas. So I'm just going to do a couple more things, and then I'm going to call it because we're running out of time. I think what would be fun to do is this. I need a bigger one, but I'm going to do some splatter because I think that would be cool. And I also want to take one of those stamps that I had, and I want to try to stamp into that. But since it's so dark, I'm going to stamp with white instead. So I'm going to put a little bit of this, I'm going to use my roller. I'm going to use a rubber stamp, and I'm going to use my little roller and try to use acrylic paint on that. The fact that I'm putting it on something that's water activatable, what happens is the wetness of the white is absorbing into the ink, so it's losing its contrast a little bit. I could go through and put some clear gesso over it to stop the activation, and then I could do more things over the top of that, and that would be a little bit more secure. That would keep it a little bit more secure. But with interest of time, I'm not going to do that. If I was, on my own, I probably would consider doing that. Okay, I'm going to bring this back to black here. The cool thing about acrylics is you can always, go over it. There we go. And then I could even paint in white for the keyboard if I want to bring back some of the whiteness to it. If I have another. Or after it dries, I could even use the acrylic marker.
I decided that I just really wasn't digging what was going on with the words over here. So I put some more of the ink over it. And now I decided I'm going to actually put this here. I decided I liked that after all. After all was said and done. So I'm going to try that. It might disappear a little bit once I get the gel. Okay, I like that better. Yeah, that speaks to me. It still shows a little bit of the original behind there peeking through, and I'm okay with that. Um, Ironically, it says let it be, and I didn't let it be. I changed it, um, but that's okay. That's my prerogative. It was not really speaking to me, and I had another idea, so I decided to go that route. And now I probably can let it be. We'll see. I like to look at things, and then if something comes to me, I might cover that a little bit more, or maybe I'll add a little bit more of the music notes to tone it down, but we will see. But that's how I work my process. Is oftentimes I will have one sitting, I'll do things, and then I'll come back to it and see it in new light. And if it keeps coming back in my head and something's just not sitting right, I'll noodle on that for a little bit, and then I come back and make whatever changes I need to make it feel like it's what I want. And yeah, I like that much better.